The New York Islanders' best goal scorer, Brock Nelson, has been struggling lately. We're going to talk about that, plus the latest roster moves and your mailbag questions coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lots going on right now with the New York Islanders as they prepare for Anthony Duclair's return, and they do make some roster moves, some of them a little surprising. So we're going to go over that, and we'll get to your mailbag questions. But first, got to talk a little bit about Brock Nelson. And look, I'm a big Brock Nelson fan. We all love Brocktober. This year it even went into Brovember. But look, it's been a rough go for Brock Nelson over the last 10 games. It's like, here's a guy who has been on, scored between 30 and 35 goals in each of the last 3 seasons, and yet cannot seem to find the net right now. And it's hard to believe, but Brock Nelson had 2 goals and an assist on November 27th in the Islanders' loss to the Boston Bruins. And in the 10 games since then, Nelson has no goals, 3 assists, and he is a -4 in those 10 games. Only 2 penalty minutes, so that's kind of good news. But even the number of shots that he's taken, it's been down over that course of that time. And he has 17 shots in those 10 games. But keep in mind that, 6 of them came in the second game, which was against Buffalo. And that he hasn't had more than 1 shot on goal in the last 6 games. So clearly, we are not seeing vintage Brock right now. And look, we know the Islanders are not built to be an elite offensive team. They are built to rely on their goaltending and to get just enough offense to win games. And, right now they're 26th in the league in goals scored. So, clearly they're kind of living up to that mantra. But, even with a 10-game slump, Brock Nelson is 3rd on this team with 10 goals. And the team needs more from Brock. Right now he's maybe on pace for 24 goals in the season. That is well below where he's been the last few years. And again, when you have a team that is challenged to score, and you have a guy who scored 37 goals, 36 goals, and 34 goals in each of the last 3 seasons, having him right now on a 24 or 25 goal pace, that is not a recipe for success. And when you add in the fact that, Anthony Duclair has been out of the lineup a lot longer than 10 games. Matthew Barzal was out of the lineup for 8 of the 10 games that Brock has been slumping. And, you need, when you have injuries, you need guys like Brock Nelson to step up and give you more And maybe the pressure of feeling like, hey, I need to do more has been one of the reasons for Brock Nelson's struggles. And it's, originally you had the line of Nelson, Siplikov, and Palmieri. And that line was outstanding. But, that line has since been broken up in part because they stopped producing offensively. And, Brock has not been getting the job done. And also, Brock Nelson is also an important part of Islanders, the power play. He is a big part of the power play. And, when you've got the power play now ranked, last in the NHL, and Brock Nelson on the season has 1 power play goal and 0 power play assists, that is, again, a problem and a source of one of too many reasons why the Islanders' power play continues to struggle. So let's even tie this whole thing together right now. Brock Nelson is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. And the Islanders have some tough decisions to make about the future of Brock Nelson. And it's more than just, okay, Brock is, good still or not good still or whatever you want to say. It also has to do with maximizing your assets, figuring out where the team is and where the team needs to be. So Brock just turned 33 in October. He'll be 34 at the start of next season. And you can't give Brock Nelson a long-term extension or a new long-term deal. And, first thing the Islanders have to figure out is what they want to do with this team. If this team is going to be retooling or rebuilding, trading Brock Nelson, as painful as that may feel, I think becomes a necessity. Because come the trade deadline, a guy who could be a second line center or a top line wing or a second line wing who can help on the power play, who's 3 years in a row a 30-plus goal scorer, he would be the ultimate rental player with the possibility of, signing him to an extension. And if the Islanders know that the core of this team maxed out 3-4 years ago when they last won a playoff series, and that it's time to retool, you can get a first-round pick and or some prospects for Brock Nelson. You might even be able to get a younger player who can help you right away as part of a deal. So, in the short run, you want Brock Nelson to play well because A, it helps the Islanders on the ice, and B, it increases his trade value. Now, if you think that this core still can be successful, and I am not of that opinion right now, I think that this core did, you haven't won a playoff round in 3 years. It's time to start making changes. But even if you're going to bring back Brock Nelson, and I love Brock Nelson as a player. I want him to do well, whether it's for the Islanders or wherever he ends up. But if you're going to keep him, you cannot sign him to more than a 3-year deal, which would basically put him at 36 at the end of the deal, and maybe no more than $6-7 million tops. The thing is this: there will be another team who is willing to give Brock more term and maybe more money than the Islanders are willing or able to give him. So, in my mind, in the short run, if you want to win hockey games, you want more from Brock Nelson. No, you need more from Brock Nelson. In the long run, if you're going to trade Brock Nelson, you want him to do well so his trade value only increases. In the short run, I would consider reuniting Siplikov and Palmieri with Brock. If you set up Bo, Barzy, and Duclair as your top line, and then you have that second line, and that sets you up for a third line with maybe Pajot, Holmstrom, and Engvall. And then you would have your, fourth line basically being, McLean, Cizikas, and either Martin or Fasching. So I think that's where this team is going to go. But without a doubt, whether they're going to sign him or trade him, or they don't know yet. And they don't know yet is probably the real answer. But I think that they've got to get Brock Nelson back on track, and soon. Every NHL player has slumps, okay, and droughts, especially goal scorers. They are notoriously streaky. But from Brock Nelson's perspective and from the Islanders' perspective, they have got to get Brock back on track and soon. And let's hope he can get it done. All right, more to get to on today's show with Anthony Duclair's return imminent. The Islanders placed a defenseman on waivers, and it wasn't who everybody expected. We're going to break down the move and what it means for the Islanders, and we'll get to your mailbag questions. We've got all this and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, this is a tough one. But this is a winger who only played 2 games for the Islanders during the 1999-2000 season, but also played for the Maple Leafs, the Nordiques, the Oilers, and the Sabres before his brief stint on the island. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million+ in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week on Prize Picks, looking at the hockey board, I see Jack Hughes. I think he'll get more than 4 shots on goal. And Artemi Panarin will get more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Select Quote, the World Series, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs, often in as little as 15 minutes. So get the right life insurance policy for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. So the Islanders did make some moves on Wednesday, and they were not necessarily the moves that everybody was expecting. So what did the Islanders do? Well, they placed defenseman Grant Hutton on waivers. And look, the move is designed to make room on the roster for Anthony Duclair. But I kind of question why you would take a big right shot defenseman and expose him to waivers, running the risk of losing him. And we won't know necessarily until Thursday afternoon whether anybody claimed Hutton. But, that is a little bit of a loss right there if Hutton ends up being claimed by another team. So what does it mean? Well, they could have sent Pierre Engvall back down because he cleared waivers on Saturday. So he would be waiver exempt for the next 30 days or 10 games, whichever comes first. Engvall played okay, the last couple of games. Can't say he was great, but he did seem to be doing more of the things that Patrick Roy asks him to do. The problem with Engvall, and everydayers, you've heard me say it, it's the inconsistency. The inconsistency is just, he'll give you 2 or 3 good games, and then he'll be invisible for 5 or 6 games. And, if he's not going to do the things that Patrick Roy wants him to do, he doesn't have a lot of value. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. They also obviously could have sent Isaiah George back down. And, George wouldn't have had to have cleared waivers. And it looks like at this point in time that George is going to rotate. And, the thing for me about Isaiah George, he and Dennis Chalowski could rotate. I don't think that is the wisest way to go. I want Isaiah George, if they're rotating, I think Chalowski adds a little offense that, none of the other defensemen, with the exception of Noah Dobson, bring to the table. And I don't want Isaiah George rotating in and out. I want Isaiah George to play, I would say, a minimum of 2 out of every 3 games. He needs to play. And the one thing they cannot do with Isaiah George is have him be in the press box over and over again, like Samuel Bolduc was for much of last year, where you just don't develop him as a player. You only learn so much by being in the press box. And, for a game, 2 games, yeah, okay. George has now sat out the last 2. I would rather have him playing every day in Bridgeport than have him playing every 3rd day or 2nd day in the NHL. And again, it depends on how you view this team. If you're still hoping for that long, that winning streak that gets the Islanders into the playoffs, and it could happen despite our frustrations with this team, because the Eastern Conference is so top heavy, and, like we've said before in the standings, just like 5 or 6 points, you can go from 15th in the conference to 8th. You win 3 in a row, you can move up that many spots in a short amount of time. But if you still think this team can really contend, not just for the playoffs, but for a cup, okay, go with the veterans, but then send George down. And if you're building for the future, figure out where the development of Isaiah George is most best served and either put him back in Bridgeport or back at the NHL. Could have waived Engvall, send Engvall down without exposing him to waivers. That was one real possibility. Doesn't look like they're doing that. Could have waived Hudson Fasching. Doesn't look like they're going to do that. I just hope they don't lose Grant Hutton. And, right-handed defensemen, not easy to come by, especially guys with the amount of size that Hutton has. He is not a world beater by any sense of the imagination. He's played 12 games. He's got 2 assists. He's a +1, only 4 penalty minutes. But again, the kind of guy who it makes sense to keep around as a 7th defenseman because, Grant Hutton is 29 years old. And, this is who he is. This is his moment, his ceiling. He's a good AHL player and a serviceable fill-in at the NHL level. So, again, I question the moves, depth at right defenseman, not easy, but that's what Lou Lamoriello decided to do. And it also most likely means that either Mike Riley and or Semyon Varlamov are likely to spend some time on LTIR in order to free up enough cap space to activate Duclair. Now, remember that after today, Friday starts the roster freeze for the holidays. No trades, no moves. So whatever move ends up being made has got to be made by that deadline, and hopefully Hutton clears waivers and we go from there. All right, we're going to get to your questions. We've got 4 of them coming up, and they are kind of diverse questions, so thank you for those. We're going to get to your questions and our Islanders birthday of the day coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And Islander fans, use your knowledge of the Islanders and the game of hockey to place some exciting bets on FanDuel. Check out the odds for Saturday's game against Toronto. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from hosts Steele and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we have some mailbag questions, and I wanted to get to these, including one that unfortunately it's been waiting for a little while, and I will get to that one. The first one is from Matt in Wall, New Jersey. He says, with the current issues on this team, it's easy for all of us to scream for Lou's head. But my question is, where are the owners? We have not heard from them in a while. Is this Lou's show? and they will only step in when the fans stop showing up at games? Matt, great question. And I think that we're seeing the answer. There have been rumors behind the scenes from several sources that ownership is getting concerned. And we're seeing more empty seats at games. If you look at the prices for tickets on the secondary market, they are at the high single or low double digits. $9, $13 a ticket for some weekday home games coming up in the next month and a half. That's got to be a concern. And the fans' frustration with this team right now has got to be a big concern. But ultimately, the question becomes, what will it take for ownership to say, hey, we've had enough. This team hasn't won a playoff series in 4 years or 3 years and counting right now. What are we going to do? Because Lou Lamoriello has already stated he's not retooling, he's not rebuilding. He wants to try to win every year. And by winning, the way this team is built, the best he can do is squeak into the playoffs as a wild card, or maybe like last year, barely make third place, and you end up with that quick first round exit. So I'm hoping we see a move soon. I don't think Lou should be able to make decisions at the trade deadline, but that is ultimately up to ownership, and it is their responsibility to see that this team is in good hands. Next question comes from Kevin. Kevin writes, how much more time must we suffer this non-competitive garbage before this team is blown up? Kevin, I think a lot of Islander fans are asking variations of this question. I guess the answer should be soon. I mean, in my mind, the answer should have been at the latest at the end of last season, but Lou chose to roll it back with essentially the same roster. And, injuries notwithstanding, and I've said this before, even when everybody is healthy on this team, at their best, they are a fringe playoff team. So I think the time to retool is past, and the longer you wait, the more difficult and longer the retool or rebuild ends up becoming. But again, we got to see. We got to see how it all plays out. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later that we end up seeing, some of these changes, because they absolutely have to be made. Next question. Based on how this team is playing, the mistakes that they make, do you think this team is playing poorly because they do not like Patrick Roy? I think they are quitting on him. And that one is from firebird@gmail.com. Look, I don't think the team is quitting on Patrick Roy. I do think some of them may not like his system, or may not feel like his system is the best way to go. But at the same time, I don't think he's lost the locker room yet. But I don't know if anything realistically can fix this team the way it is presently constructed. Real quick, because we have time for one more, and this is a history question. Would like to know your thoughts on the Pat LaFontaine trade, and if you'd agreed with it then or now, and looking back, did it help or hurt the Islanders? This is from Timothy in Columbus, Georgia. And Timothy, I'm sorry it took so long to get to this one. I waited till I got a few more mailbag questions. And look, if you go back and look at the LaFontaine trade, the Islanders gave up LaFontaine, Randy Wood, Randy Hillier, and a 4th-round pick in 1992 for Pierre Turgeon, Dave McElwain, Uwe Krupp, and Benoit Hogue. So my answer is this. Do I think Pat LaFontaine should have been traded? No. They should have signed him, kept him, and, built the team around him. But ownership wasn't going to pay him. Bill Torrey had to trade him. So I didn't like the trade at the time. But given that you had to trade him because the owners weren't going to pay him, I think they did pretty well. I mean, Krupp was a solid defenseman. Hogue was a 30-goal guy. Turgeon was electric during his time on the island, and McIlwain was a serviceable bottom six guy. So that's my feeling. Should the trade have happened at all? No. Given that it had to happen, I think they did as well as can be expected, given the circumstances. And thank you very much, by the way, for that question. All right, time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And today is the 55th birthday of former Islanders winger Scott Pearson. Pearson, a native of Cornwall, Ontario, 6th overall pick in the 1988 draft by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Made his NHL debut in 88-89 for Toronto, played for Quebec, Edmonton, Buffalo, Toronto again, and then joined the Islanders for 2 games during the 99-2000 season. Spent the rest of the season with the Chicago Wolves of the IHL. But in those 2 games, he did have an assist, and it came on December 19th, 1999, at the old barn, the Nassau Coliseum. Islanders hosting the Devils. Martin Brodeur and Roberto Luongo, 2 Hall of Fame goalies, going at it. Luongo for the Islanders. And in this game, with the score 3-2 Islanders, early in the third period, our Islanders birthday of the day, Scott Pearson sets up Olli Jokinen for a goal. Nicholas Anderson had the other assist. The Islanders go on to take a 4-2 lead. They win the game by a score of 5-3. Scott Pearson had the assist. He was a +2 and had 3 shots on goal in 15 minutes and 4 seconds. 46 saves for Roberto Luongo as the Islanders end up winning a game that they were outshot 49-29 in. So big game for Luongo and the only point for Pearson. Scott Pearson, briefly a New York Islander. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We will be back tomorrow with a full preview of Saturday's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll know by then whether or not Grant Hutton passed through waivers, and we'll give you any updates as well. If you have another question, comment, topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. And I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.